One of the biggest stories for the Pittsburgh Steelers this season will be who wins the starting quarterback, but also when you look at Mason Rudolph, Mitch Trubisky, Kenny Pickett, and those guys, you're going to be looking at a new part of the Steelers offense that wasn't featured before, and that was throwing the ball to the middle of the field more often and deeper down the middle part of the field, but also who they throw it to down the middle of the field could be very important with Pat Freiermuth. We're going to talk about that connection by whoever will be the starting quarterback and what that might look like in the Steelers offense this season with Matt Canada. I'm Chris Carter of the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, and YouTube. If you're watching this video on YouTube, hit the like button on the video. If you're enjoying it, hit the subscribe button to our YouTube channel to get all of our daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our breaking news updates and our bonus episodes that we sometimes put out. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered all season long with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. Go to betonline.net where the game starts. Now, we took a weekend. Happy belated Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. But I wanted to come back to the quarterback position because that is going to be the topic of the year. Is Kenny Pickett going to win the job? What's Mitch Trubisky going to look like? Will Mason Rudolph prove it? Will he step up in this competition and make this an interesting three quarterback chase? All that's going to be asked about. But one factor, I think, of the Steelers' offense that should not be overlooked, that's going to be very important in this role, is how these quarterbacks execute in throwing the ball down the middle of the field. We talked about it all season long. It just didn't happen enough for the 2021 Pittsburgh Steelers. Ben Roethlisberger seemingly didn't want to do it. And I've talked about this before. I've broken this down on Carter's Classroom film sessions. There were plenty of options all year long. For anyone that says that, Matt Canada doesn't draw up plays for the middle of the field or there was never any opportunities to throw to the middle of the field, wrong, and wrong. This has always been a situation where I think Ben Roethlisberger, with his lack of arm strength, was trying to help the Steelers protect the football and didn't want to make the bigger mistakes over the middle where there'd be more defenders and risk throwing more interceptions that would put the team behind. But now you have younger quarterbacks. Their arms aren't coming back from elbow surgery or, 18 years of playing in the NFL or however long Ben Roethlisberger was. It's going to look different, and they're going to push the ball differently. And that can open up a lot of different things in the offense. Now, to give you an example, I pulled some charts from Pro Football Focus because they chart out passing. Different places chart out passing, but I like the way they display it here. So if you're listening on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or Odyssey, I'll explain things to YouTube. I'm bringing up the numbers now. Bang, you're able to see. So these are Ben's numbers throwing all over to the field. You see where that the kind of cutoff is between he threw 203 times up down the middle of the field when it came to 0 to 10 yards. But when it gets past 10 yards, 40 attempts, only 20 of them were completed for 357 yards, 1 interception, 0 touchdowns. And he did have some deep balls, as you saw. He has 4 touchdowns of deep down the field, 20 pass yards, but only 19 attempts, and not the best numbers when it comes to consistency. Those were shot plays that happened to work out in those situations. But you want more consistency. You want more chances for the Steelers to be able to lock in that situation and take advantage of the middle part of the field. And this was a big reason to me why the Pittsburgh Steelers struggled at running the ball, because Ben Roethlisberger wasn't able to push the ball consistently enough down the field. Teams, and part of the reason some of those deep balls were completed down the middle part of the field is because people weren't covering for it. They weren't looking for it because they weren't concerned with the Steelers' deep ball. And I'm not even saying 30, 40, 50-yard deep balls, just 20 yards down the middle of the field, hit a tight end on a seam, bang, and force those linebackers to not creep up. And you saw a lot of times when Najee Harris would run the ball, those linebackers, they'd fly right to the line of scrimmage. It would make life harder for the offensive line, which would make life harder for Najee Harris. So you're probably sitting there thinking, okay, we know about Ben, but what about the other guys? Well, let's take a look at Mitch Trubisky's passing chart. This is from 2018 when he made the Pro Bowl with the Bears and played almost a full season. Now, because here's the thing is that you see here, he's attempted only two more passes than Ben Roethlisberger, past 10 yards, further down the field. But still, that's with less games because he played less games. Now, here's the thing also. Mitch Trubisky, and this to me is going to be his biggest challenge. You see these interception numbers. He threw 4 interceptions down the middle of the field, past 10 yards, 2 interceptions, past 20 yards, bringing Ben Bunt numbers back up. He only threw 1 interception combined when you look at those numbers. So looking at Mitch Trubisky's pass chart, it's clear he can throw down the middle part of the field, but also his attempts were way down. You look at that year, he attempted 434 passes compared to last year. Ben threw 605 passes, again because the Steelers were trying to play the short passing game in hopes to try to catch defenses off guard, get some easy passes, some big plays that way, and then hopefully open up Najee Harris after the fact. But that never happened. Mitch Trubisky, he's going to need to improve his ability to protect the football, his ability to see the field. But this is where it gets interesting for me because now I'm about to pull up a passing chart of Kenny Pickett. Now, this is Pro Football Focus, but I don't have Pro Football Focus for colleges. I have the NFL Draft Guide, and they did this targeted passes, sort of like a passing chart where you see, as I just pulled it up here, if it's red, it means that quarterback was when they targeted that area, they were above average. If they were blue, they were below average. If they were white, they were kind of in the middle. So you see, if you're looking at this or if you're listening to this right now, Kenny Pickett's passing chart is very strong around that 10, 15, 20 yards down the middle part of the field, in between the numbers, in between the hash marks. That's going to be something that I think plays a major role for the Steelers offense this year. Is I can see him and Mitchell Trubisky and Mason Rudolph all making sure that is a focal part of their game, being able to throw over linebackers, being able to get it underneath safeties, because that's also where that pocket is, because that's something that is tricky and does take work to do. It takes arm strength, it takes accuracy, it takes timing, because those linebackers, especially if they see it's a pass, they start backing up, they start pinching back to the safeties. Those safeties, they try to pinch that window as well. So it takes time to develop that. But this is why I see this. This is why I see this being a major part of the quarterback battle this year, is who can fit the ball best down the middle part of the field. Sideline passes, great. If you can hit a bomb down the sideline, awesome. That is another part of this team. But this team drafted Najee Harris for a reason, and it was to run the ball. And if you can't run the ball because teams aren't afraid of your quarterback being able to throw down the middle of the field, that's going to create problems, and the Steelers are going to be right back to square one when it comes to facing those problems. So this is why I wanted to bring this up and bringing up these numbers, bring up these charts. If you're watching on YouTube, you got the easier look at it. If you're listening, I did my best to try to explain what these charts were looking like to you. But point being, Mitch Trubisky has experience throwing down in the middle of the field. Kenny Pickett had a lot of success for Pitt throwing down in the middle part of the field. These are going to be things that we're going to be looking for and trying to hear about when rookie camp starts, OTA starts, training camps going, and then in the preseason, where are the Steelers throwing the ball with these quarterbacks? So, are they doing this? Because if the Steelers come out this year and they're running the same offense that they saw last year, okay, yeah, fire Matt Canada. But Mason Rudolph let it out with Jim Rome, months ago in an interview saying we didn't run half the playbook when talking about the Steelers offense. And I've been saying for a while, like, man, there are certain things that just are there that Ben isn't getting to or can't see, or he doesn't have enough confidence to make those throws with his arm. And I was kind of feeling like there were several times I'm like, man, there's other wrinkles here that should be here but aren't. And this is what I've been talking about. I truly think a big part of the story of the Pittsburgh Steelers will be their quarterbacks getting to throw back down the middle of the field. But who they're throwing to down the middle of the field is going to be a big part of this as well, because as I talked about, they drafted Najee Harris to run the football. They also drafted a guy right after him to help with this very problem, and that's Pat Freiermuth. We'll talk more about Pat Freiermuth and some of his numbers and analytics in just a minute here that pertain to this. But first, we got to talk to you guys about betonline.net. Betonline.net is your number one source for all your betting stats and sports information. You can find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's NBA playoffs and the Stanley Cup playoffs and Major League Baseball. All of that action is going on right now, and the only place to get your information is from betonline.net. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in the action when you visit BetOnline, where the game starts. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. We thank you for making the Locked On Steelers podcast your first listen every day. Now, getting to Pat Freiermuth's discussion here. Now, Pat Freiermuth had a good rookie season. I'd even say a very good rookie season, especially when you consider he didn't get all that many opportunities to be a huge playmaker, because imagine Pat Freiermuth in prime Ben Roethlisberger days. I mean, this guy caught 7 touchdowns this past year, and you were able to see his ability to go up and get the football, to run through tackles, to block people, to be physical, and you saw how good of a player he was as a rookie, just adapting to the NFL with the worst version of Ben Roethlisberger we've ever seen. Now imagine Pat Freiermuth getting that opportunity with a young quarterback who has that arm, who is at a different stage of their career and can get him the ball in different spots. And for the record, yes, he caught 60 passes for 497 yards and 7 touchdowns. Imagine Pat Freiermuth being able to do that with a bit more. And with tight ends, you can line guys up in different parts of the field, and a lot of offenses do these days. A lot of offenses will line up tight ends like their wide receivers. You see Travis Kelce. You see guys. I mean, even the Steelers kind of did it with Eric Ebron. When they first got him, because he's one of those athletic tight ends. But when I'm looking at Pat Freiermuth, I'm looking at a guy with all the receiver weapons. We just talked about in last week in one of the episodes, talking about that the Steelers get the best wide receiver haul of this draft class. You still got Deontay Johnson and Chase Claypool. Now you have George Pickens and Calvin Austin, and then you get to add in Miles Boykin and whoever can fight from the back of the depth chart. You have athletic wide receivers you can line up in different positions, and that to me is going to be a big part of this, because if those guys are able to line up all over the place, Pat Freiermuth is going to be able to line up in the middle part of the field. Now let's go to Pat Freiermuth's catch chart from 2021. Now, if you look at the chart here, you see the bulk of his numbers came in the middle, in between the numbers, in between the hashes, looking right between that 0 to 10 yard range. Caught 25 of 29 passes for 214 yards, but no touchdowns and no interceptions were completed there. And then you see the numbers dwindle down as they go further down the field. If you're looking between 10 and 20 yards, he was only targeted 8 times down the middle of the field at that range. Only caught 2 of those passes for 39 yards. And no touchdowns, no interceptions, and 20 yards and beyond, he was only targeted once down the middle part of the field. To me, you drafted Pat Freiermuth to be able to be this guy who could get in that range that we're talking about, beyond 10 yards down the middle of the field, because that's where those linebackers have to start to think. When you're looking at X's and O's, when you're drawing up plays, a huge part of this is trying to get the linebackers, the guys that cover the middle part of the field, to think and to open up one way or the other. If they're falling back a lot in that situation, it opens up more run plays. If they're playing up a lot, it opens up more pass plays. And that's the balance game that you want to play if you're an offensive coordinator and if you're a quarterback. But if you're not able to, or you're not confident enough to target the ball down to that part of the field, you're going to miss those opportunities. And it's going to take away a big part of trying to have the kind of ground game the Steelers want to have with Najee Harris, especially when you don't have the league's best offensive line. And I'm exaggerating there by saying not having the league's best offensive line, because the Steelers did not have a good offensive line last year. And I do think they'll take steps forward, but I don't think they're going to become anything close to a top 10 offensive line. Maybe top 15, top 16. If they can get to the middle part of the league, you're happy with that offensive line, because you're excited about the playmakers on this team, and you're excited about the defense carrying the team with the young playmakers kind of being difference makers on offense that create plays for you. Remember, last time the Steelers won the Super Bowl, they were quoted, quote, the worst offensive line, or the team with the worst offensive line to win the Super Bowl. And I'm not saying that you want to replicate that specifically, but saying that it can be done, especially with young athletic quarterbacks, which is what Mike Tomlin's wanted. Guys who can escape, guys who can throw accurately, guys who can read the field, guys who can keep their eyes down the field while escaping. And that is Kenny Pickett to a T, which is, again, why I come back to Kenny Pickett and his pass chart. If you're able to look at Kenny Pickett, and I'm pulling up the pass chart here. You see the red part of the chart here. If you're watching on YouTube, down that middle part of the field, and we switch to Pat Freiermuth. That's the range is right there. If you can get Pat Freiermuth the ball more than 2 times an entire season down the middle part of the field past 10 yards, you're doing better than what Ben Roethlisberger was able to do his last year. And again, I'm not disparaging Ben because Ben put in a Hall of Fame career before this. This is just where he was last year. The Steelers were in a hard spot because of his contract, and they didn't want to make it like an ugly, like, hey, we got to get out of our way, man. You got to get out of our way. They wanted to honor their guy who had been their guy for so long, and that's why he was on the roster. But the truth is the truth. Ben, this was the worst version of Ben that we saw in his entire career. And that part of that middle part of the field was not taken advantage of the way it needs to. And Pat Freiermuth, that strength of his game, that if it can be tapped into, it looks like it could be tapped into when you look at Kenny Pickett's chart. And even Mitch Trubisky, even though his numbers weren't, great down the middle part of the field, that was second year Mitchell Trubisky. He has the arm strength to get it down there, and you can see there's that the attempts, even though he threw almost 200 less passes than Ben Roethlisberger, the attempts were slightly above. And you want to see him get more of those opportunities. Whoever wins the quarterback battle. Now, for those who are probably thinking, Chris, well, who will win the quarterback battle? I've talked about this. I talked about this at the start of last week. We will be talking about that all off season long, going into training camp. There's no need to beat the dead horse here because it will be beaten late, probably even later this week. I still say this is an every man for himself, a race that's going to be a lot more even than I think anyone gives it credit for. If you're leaning any one specific way, I truly think that might be just a personal preference here because Mike Tomlin even came out and said last week Kenny Pickett could win the starting job, but Mitch Trubisky was hired according to Jeremy Fowler, with the Steelers. The Steelers told Mitch Trubisky that, hey, they might draft Kenny Pickett. So, with Jeremy Fowler of ESPN bringing that out, that's a good sign. I think that says that Mitch Trubisky took the job knowing he might not be the guy, or he's going to have to at least fight for it. And the same thing goes for Mason Rudolph. I don't think that Mason Rudolph's completely out of this. He's the guy that knows the offense. He's been in the locker room. I don't think that he's cemented in any way. He's not going to just come in and just have the top spot. But I do think that this is going to be a much more even kill race. But again, a big part of this to me is going to be who can establish that connection, that relationship, that rapport with Pat Freiermuth going down the middle part of the field. Hit some seams, some deep posts, some deep crosses, some hook patterns. Attacking the middle part of the field, especially with the tight end, the big guy who can go up and get it. We saw him go up and get it in traffic all last season long to haul it in and keep it moving. He was showing that he would not only catch those plays, but then move past defenders. Those are things that the quarterback needs to do. And if they can get a guy to do it in this crew, I think that's going to be a major advantage in the QB race between all these guys trying to win the spot. So we'll keep eyes on that and eyes and ears on that as rookie camp and OTAs and all those things get started, because that's going to be a big part of this is how are each of these quarterbacks establishing relationships with wide receivers, because we haven't had to talk about that for years. It was more so which receiver was going to establish their rapport with Ben. Now it's you got to establish that rapport with everybody, and everybody's fighting for a job. So that's going to be a major part there. But how can the Steelers help Kenny Pickett win that battle sooner? We're going to talk about that in just a minute here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, because still there's that optimism with a first-round pick quarterback. That's the kind. If you're drafting a guy there, you're hoping that he becomes that guy sooner rather than later. But we'll talk about what steps might be in place to help with that become sooner rather than later. We'll do that in just a second here. But first, we're going to talk to you guys about Built Bar. With summer right around the corner, it's May. Y'all know that y'all need some food to be on the go when you're taking with you, when you're out and about, whether you're on vacation, just walking around, enjoying the nice weather. That's where you can get a Built Bar as the perfect snack to go with you to keep you fueled for your summer adventures. The best part of Built Bar is that they're healthy and delicious, so you're not sacrificing eating good food just to be healthy. All Built Bars and Puff Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. That means you can eat healthy and enjoy doing it. If you haven't tried the new Built Puff Bars yet, those are amazing. They come in flavors like banana cream pie and even churro. They're the first ever protein-infused marshmallow, and they are amazing flavors covered in 100% real chocolate and so fun to eat. And if you just like the regular Built Bars, guess what? They have so many flavors of those as well. You can even buy a mixed box of 12 different flavors that gives you different Built Bars and Built Puffs to mix it up so that there's something for everyone there. I like the double chocolate Built Bar. That's my favorite flavor of Built Bar, but you can find your own when you go to Built.com. But remember, All Built bars average around 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Compare that to the average candy bar that's 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, dozens of net carbs. That's an amazing opportunity for you to eat something great, eat some chocolate, but also make it easier on yourself and make it more healthy for you. So go to built.com, check out all the flavors: banana cream pie, raspberry, double chocolate, mint chocolate, whatever you want. They probably got it. And there's new flavors coming out every month. When you go to built.com, use the promo code LOCKED15. That's LOCKED15, LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off your next order when you visit built.com. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm Chris Carter, your host here. Now, remember, you can always call into this show. The call line is still open. And in fact, it's going to be even more open now because the NFL draft is over. If there were some people who we had a lot of NFL draft questions, we weren't able to get them all in on the show because there were just so many of them. And then the draft happened, and a lot of the questions kind of became irrelevant because they were about the first round or the second round or a player that's now gone and not a Steeler. So we weren't able to do that. But I do encourage you to call anytime. Call in the 412-223-6644. You'll get an immediate voicemail. When you go to voicemail, leave your name, where you're from, and your question. Keep between, no more than like 30 seconds to a full minute. That's where we kind of try to cap it at so we can keep it rolling here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. And if you're international, email LOSteelersTopicBag@gmail.com to get your question, attach an audio clip, and that'll help your situation. All right. We have a caller from Bob that's about the quarterback position and how to help it. I've addressed this question kind of before, but I thought it would serve to bring it back up again. Here's Bob with his question.
Yeah, my name's Bob, and I have a question. Are the Steelers going to hire a quarterbacks coach like what they did with, what was his name, Kevin Gilbride, for Kenny Pickett like they did with Ben Roethlisberger? That's my question. Thanks.
Thank you for your question, Bob. And I do want to point out, yes, they are, and they have, and not just one quarterback coach, but 2 quarterback coaches. And this was an indication when this happened. It was kind of like, whoa, wait a second. Are they going to get a quarterback in the first round? Because we were going back and forth about that for a while. I wasn't convinced it was happening because I just thought that the way that people were trading up in the draft and trying to get moves, that one of them was going to get desperate and go for a quarterback. And Mike Tomlin even kind of said they were surprised by that because that was interesting. But again, thank you, Bob, for your question. Now, the Steelers do have 2 quarterback coaches. They have Mike Sullivan, who's their current main quarterback coach. He's the guy that's been on the team for a little while now. They also hired David Corley. He's as a team assistant. He's the assistant quarterback coach. He's coming from the University of Richmond where he was their running back coach. But they're going to have 2 coaches dedicated to working with those guys. And then it's also on top of Matt Canada, who was the quarterback's coach before he was the offensive coordinator. So you're going to have a lot of guys who have experience coaching quarterbacks or are there to coach quarterbacks working on these guys. Believe me, I think that there's going to be a lot of hands-on experiences on top of not just the X's and O's and the technique and the things like that go to quarterback, but the mental toughness or the mental aptitude to say, hey, this is where we need you to step up here and now. I truly believe a big part of this is also Mike Tomlin, because when he inherited Ben Roethlisberger, Mike Tomlin, you never saw him get in Ben's face the way that he would on Marquise Pouncey or any of the other players that he has over the years when they mess up or they do something, guys that he's kind of been like, hey, I need this from you right now. That was something that I never saw him do, at least in public, with Ben. But everybody has different coaching strategies. Chuck Noll, a lot of people said Chuck Noll took it easy on Terry Bradshaw because he felt like that wasn't the speed to go with him. And there's different ways to go with it. But now you're not dealing with a quarterback who's already won a Super Bowl, who's already become the favorite guy in the city. That's part of the team. Now you have all these new guys that nobody has a leg up on Tomlin in experience with the organization. Kenny Pickett's a rookie. Mitch Trubisky's new and coming from being an unsuccessful second overall pick by the Chicago Bears and a backup for the Bills. Mason Rudolph has been a backup that hasn't really shown to be that he could be an NFL starter. There's flashes here and there, but not consistency. So this is Mike Tomlin's chance to mold a person really into the starting quarterback that he wants them to be and kind of establish that relationship beforehand. Now, Again, the coaches that they got aside from that, to answer Bob's question, David Corley, guy he has, he has different experience. He's going to be coming in. He's probably going to work with. But Mike Sullivan, we talked to Mike Sullivan last year. And no, not the Penguins, Mike Sullivan. That's the head coach of the Pittsburgh Penguins, the hockey team. Go listen to Hunter Hodes and Locked On Penguins if you want to get there. Although I was there for Game 3, and that was epic the way the Penguins won that game. I was in the house watching from the lower bowl. But when it comes to the Mike Sullivan, the quarterback's coach, this is a guy who's been all over the place. He's been a wide receivers coach. He's been a quarterback coach for Eli Manning. He was with the Giants for some time. He was a coordinator for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He was the Broncos quarterback coach for a little bit, and now he's with the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is a guy who last year, his main thing was he wanted to get their footwork down, and he was helping Dwayne Haskins take steps forward before his unfortunate passing. And he's a guy that's going to help these guys refine their things. Now, if you listen to or watch people like Dan Orlovsky who look at Kenny Pickett and sometimes he drifts a little too much to his liking on film, there's going to be things that they kind of work with Kenny Pickett to help with that. But one of the things that I think comes naturally Kenny Pickett is how he finds ways to keep plays alive. I'm not saying he's like Ben Roethlisberger like this, but if you go through his tape of his previous years in playing in college, and I watched all his games at Pitt because even before I was a Pitt reporter, I went to Pitt. I have that connection, and I've been watching him since he beat Miami in 2017 when he first took over and upset them. So I've been all about watching Kenny Pickett and his growth over the years, and there's so many times that he would find a way to escape a play, dodge a sack, and keep his eyes downfield and be able to make a good throw, not just as far as X's and O's wise and picking the right guy, but also throwing it accurately even on tough angles. The big problem, and I've said this before, I've said this on Steeler Nation Radio, I've said this on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I've said this everywhere. A big part of this problem was Pitt's receivers had the case of the drops. They had the most drops in college football in 2020 and 2019. They weren't far behind that. 2021, they corrected that, and they were able to become a much more consistent group, which is why you saw Kenny Pickett's numbers skyrocket. But I truly think he's had this talent for a while, and maybe this even secretly benefits the Steelers, because if they had caught passes those 2 years prior, he's probably definitely a top 10 quarterback in that situation. The Steelers would have had to trade up to get him. But I digress. I come back to the point that I'm making here about working with Kenny Pickett. There's going to be things he needs to sharpen. I think there's times that he does kind of work a little too much in trying to move the feet when he doesn't have to. I think he likes to use his athleticism. He likes to be on the run because he knows when he's in control of a play, he can make big plays. But again, that's something that Ben Roethlisberger had to work his way out of. That was a big reason why this organization went and got Todd Haley to come in the early 2010s and say, Ben Roethlisberger, you're going to get the ball out faster. You're not going to be standing around back there because we want you to be able to play for another 10 years. And lo and behold, they achieved that because you saw Ben Roethlisberger not retire until 2022 after the NFL playoff loss to the Kansas City Chiefs. So I think a big part of this, thank you, Bob, for your question. But a big part of this is they have the coaches in place. They're going to be specifically working on Kenny Pickett. And again, I said this last week, and I'm going to say it all offseason long. Don't panic if Kenny Pickett's not the day one starter, if he's not the day two starter, if he's not the starter in the regular season. This is going to be a long battle. There are plenty of teams, and I talked about this Jenna Harder on Friday. Josh Allen didn't start most of his rookie season. Patrick Mahomes didn't start until the last game of his rookie season. There are plenty of big-name quarterbacks. Ben Roethlisberger wasn't the starter going into his rookie year. Tommy Maddox got hurt. There's plenty of guys that work that way. It's just going to be about how ready is he versus the competition in Mitch Trubisky and Mason Rudolph. Those guys have NFL experience. They have a little bit more know-how about how to combat defenses, the speed of them, the height of them, how smart they are, and how they try to trick you and bait you into things. And that might be where their edge is and what Kenny Pickett has to grow with. But if you see that competitive toughness, if you see him working, if you see the accuracy kicking in, if you hear good things from Mike Sullivan and David Corley, these are the things that you want to hear from the Steelers brass about the development of Kenny Pickett. Because again, it's not just about how he does this year. It's going to be about how he develops into a quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers and to potentially become their next franchise quarterback behind Ben Roethlisberger and to ultimately be the heir at the position. So we'll be talking about that and a lot more here on the Locked On Steelers podcast as our week goes on. We'll be back tomorrow with another episode right here. Thank you for checking us out. If you were watching us on YouTube, hit the like button. If you enjoyed the video, subscribe to our YouTube channel to get all of our daily episodes. Thanks so much for all those who participate and check us out. If you want to help out the show even further, go on Apple Podcasts, leave a 5-star review with a positive comment. Do both at the same time. You get a special shout out at the end of the show. And remember to call into the show whenever you get the chance. If you have a question, even if you think it's a dumb question, as long as you keep it short, you can call in at 412-223-6644. Give me your name and where you're from. Also, shout out to my man Bob. You didn't tell me where you're from. I'll let you off easy, Bob, but I'm going to do this from now on. If y'all give me your name and you don't give me where you're from, I'm going to make up where you're from. It's going to be something silly. So we're going to have fun with that at the next time it happens. But thanks again to Bob. Thanks again to everyone who calls in, and thanks to everyone who listens and watches. We appreciate all the support. We'll be back tomorrow, Tuesday, with another episode talking about your Pittsburgh Steelers on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. I'll be back on your screens and in your ears very soon.